Hi, I'm Jennifer and this is my channel. I'm really glad that you're here to listen to me talk about books and crafts, although today it's just going to be books. More than anyone else in my real life wants to hear me talk about books. And today specifically I want to talk about The Shards of Earth by Adrian Tchaichovsky. This is, as I've said before, the first book in a trilogy. It is sci-fi, and it is very, oh, we've got a little help here. Got a little help with our honey bunny. It is, and this is my soulmate, honey bunny doodle butt, the sweetest rescue of all. Okay. So, as I was saying, Shards of Earth is a sci-fi book. Our main characters, and we do get the story from two perspectives. One is from Idris and one is from Solace. Solace is, I don't know if she's exactly a clone, but it is clear that she is a genetically engineered human who was engineered specifically to be sort of an idealized human. She's a soldier. She fought in the war, which is certainly a big part of this book, and I'll talk about it a little more later. And she specifically fought with the Parthenon, so she is not the only genetically idealized human. She's actually one of many female soldiers that are part of what is called the Parthenon. So one perspective that we get is her perspective. The other is Idris. Idris is what's called an intermediary, or for short an INT, I-N-T, and he also fought in the war as a very specialized type of soldier. So to give you sort of the setup of the book, we actually start about 70 years, I think, after the war has ended. And what we know is that, one, the Earth no longer exists. Human beings now live more nomadic lives as essentially colonizers on other planets, although we're definitely not at the top of the food chain as far as that goes. And the Earth no longer exists because it was destroyed by an alien species called the Architects. And we, the humans, and perhaps other species that have encountered them, call them the Architects because they come to inhabited planets and they completely remake them in these sort of unfathomable geometric shapes. But it also kills all of the living beings on the planet. And so this brings us into what an intermediary is. An intermediary is a human being who has the ability to communicate with these architects. And specifically, Idris and other soldiers like him have been modified in some way. Their brains have been modified in some way. It's not exactly explained how they did it, other than it was largely experimental. They didn't really know what they were doing, and most of the people who volunteered to become intermediaries died. Idris is one of the few who survived the process of becoming an intermediary, so he can do a few really specialized things. One is that he can communicate with the Architects, or at least he can kind of try. He's the only type of human being that even has a chance at it. Two, he can navigate in what they call unspace, which seems to be the equivalent of moving through wormholes or going into hyperspace, if you're thinking along the, moving faster than the speed of light, moving not magically. There's, supposedly some sort of scientific basis to it, but he can navigate through hyperspace, let's say. So hyperspace, light space, whatever you want to call it, he can get people from point A to point B. And that is because of what happened, what they did to his brain when he became an intermediary. So the book opens, we're 70 years past the war, the architects have disappeared. And at this point, humanity has mostly kind of assumed that they're not coming back, or at least we have all sort of sighed in relief and set down roots in places and just are living our lives, not expecting the architects to come back. So Idris, as I said, as one of the first original intermediaries who in fact volunteered for this job, he's taken up with a group of spacers. So these are people who they're on, an old junker type ship. They take jobs as they can, transporting things, finding things, etc. So there is an element of found family here. So there is Idris, there's Rollo, who's the captain. So we have the captain, Rollo. We have Ollie, who is another human. One of the things that we learn over the course of the book is that because humanity was on the run and moving from place to place for so long during the war, there are many humans who were extremely malnourished and not doing well. So, and Ollie is one of them. She suffered from really severe malnutrition, essentially, growing up, and so she has some physical disabilities as a result of that, limitations that she makes up for in other ways. Essentially, she's built herself her own movement device that she calls the Scorpion, that is also a fighting device. It's actually very cool. There is Kittering, who's a Hanalambra, which is a type of alien. And then there is also a Hiver, which is another type of alien. They are made up of different parts, like the parts come together to make the Hiver, and then the Hiver can also break apart, like parts of it can break off, they can reform into different Hivers. It's an interesting concept. And then there's another human named Chris, who is primarily a lawyer whose job it is to make sure that Idris isn't conscripted, because although he is a free human and he volunteered to become an intermediary, his skills are sought after and rare. And since the war, most intermediaries are actually people who have been conscripted into the job, and so they are on what are called leashes. In other words, they're essentially slaves. They're like, let's say, convicts who are slaves. I don't even know yet, or at least it is not explained in the first book whether or not these slaves can ever be free from their leashes. I don't know. Seems like they're just kind of bought and sold, and so people assume that Idris is essentially for sale, and of course he is not. He is a free human, and so he needs Chris around to kind of keep him out of trouble, as we see several times throughout the book. Chris is also very good with a knife. This is her other hidden talent. So there is this found family that Idris has around him, and their ship is called the Vulture God. And essentially the way that Solace and Idris come back together, because they did know each other. They fought together during the war, and they knew each other for a period of time after the war. It seems like it was fairly short, maybe a month. They did have a special relationship, but they haven't seen each other in 70 years or however long it's been. Solace has spent some of that time essentially in hibernation, stasis, sleep, and then she was woken up. Like, she actually spent a couple decades in stasis is what it sounds like, and then she was taken out of stasis, and she's actually gone up in rank and importance as in her organization as one of the Partheni, as they're called, Whereas Idris has thrown in with this group of spacers, and he's been just going around the galaxy doing whatever, taking whatever jobs are available since the war. The other thing about Idris that we learned very early on is he hasn't slept since the war. So he can't sleep. He's not going crazy, but he hasn't slept in 70 years, nor has he aged, nor has Solace aged, which is really quite interesting. They come together because Idris is on a planet just randomly. They're collecting their pay from the last job, and Solace is sent to find him because the Parthenon needs an intermediary. They know he's there, and she has a relationship with him. So her job is to entice him to come over to the Parthenon, and just to kind of flesh out the politics of the world. So you have the Partheni, who again are not born, they are created somehow. It's again unclear how that happens. That isn't specifically explained, but they are supposed to be genetically, if not perfect, then close to perfect soldiers. They're only women, and they have their own political structure. There are also humans, of course, and there are some humans who call themselves nativists. They believe that humanity should not cede power to any aliens. They also don't consider the Partheni human because, I mean, they're not actually grown in vats, I don't think, but that's sort of the feeling that these nativists have. And then there's alien species, obviously, that humanity is now interacting with, including the ones that we kind of hear about are, one, the Asil, and it's Essiel, so however you think that's supposed to be pronounced. But essentially, they are these aliens who know how to ward off the architects. So one of the things that humanity and other aliens have learned is that the architects will not attack a planet that has a specific type of artifacts on it. Humanity calls these the species. They don't know. No one knows, or at least humanity certainly does not know who created these artifacts. Humanity calls them the originators. That's what they're called in the books. And if these artifacts are on a planet, the architects will not attack it. But one of the things humanity learned is that if you pick them up and you try to transport them, they no longer work. But the Asil have a way to transport these artifacts from planet to planet. And so one of the things that has happened in the intervening years is that a lot of human colonies have agreed to be run by, subject to the Asil, because when the Asil come to the planet that they're on, they bring some artifacts, and then they know that they're safe from the architects, which makes sense. So that's one of the things that is happening, is that there are lots of colonies that have decided to join up with the Asil. This is something the nativists are obviously against. There are also sort of more moderate human governmental bodies, I guess. And we do meet some of those people as well. Their job is to try not to let things get too bad, sort of kind of control things. They are not allied with the Parthenon, but they're not openly fighting, but there's definitely political friction. There's friction with the colonies that have joined up with the Asil. So there's all of this political stuff going on, which Idris has kept himself pretty much out of, but Solace is, of course, right in the middle of, because she is one of the Partheni. And, of course, the Partheni do not have ints. They do not have intermediaries, which is why they want Idris, both so that he can act for them, use his skills to their benefit, but also they want to maybe figure out how to make some intermediaries themselves. So this is sort of the setup of the novel. Solace finds Idris on this just kind of random planet. She's able to be helpful to him. He's thrown in a prison temporarily by someone who's trying to essentially enslave him, and she is very helpful in getting him out of that situation. She joins up with him because, of course, he's not going to simply come over to the Parthenon. She knows that she has to be much more strategic in trying to get him to do that. And so now you got all the people. You have Solace and Idris and the whole crew on the ship, the Vulture God, and they're off doing their thing. So what I will say about this book, and I don't want to spoil anything, is that this book goes from battle to battle to battle to battle. And I was not bored. This was not boring. The battle scenes were well written. It was interesting. And I will also say, even though I say it goes from battle to battle to battle to battle, and it does, there is character development here. Like, you get to know Idris, you get to know Solace, you also get to know other members of the crew, and it's well done. Like, this is a well-written book. The character development is well done. As I said previously, this is the first of a trilogy, so a lot of this is setup, but there's also a lot of action, and you get the answers to some questions in this book, but you get a lot more questions, and the questions are interesting. One of the biggest questions is, who are the architects? Why are they doing what they are doing? What makes them tick? And we definitely do not get the answer to that question in this book, but we get one part of that answer by the end. And it's really interesting. And it made me want to continue reading in this series. So this book does not end on a cliffhanger either, which I appreciate, because I really don't like cliffhangers at the end of my books, even if it is a part of a series. Like, I want to keep reading this series, obviously, but I didn't feel unsatisfied at the end of this book. Like, I felt like that was a good first book. I can let it sit for a while. I'm not going to go and get the next book in the series immediately, although I will probably get on a waiting list at the library, see how quickly I can get it. And so it was really well done in that way, too. I recommend this book. I think if you like sci-fi, you'll like this book. I will also say, as I was reading it, I thought about a lot of the books I've read where there's found family, but specifically it made me think of the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers, which is one of my favorite series, starting with The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. You've got that found family, people and other aliens on sort of a ship held together with duct tape type of theme, which we've also got going on in the Shards of Earth. And humans are no longer at the top of the food chain in that series either. So I found there were a lot of parallels there that I found were interesting and enjoyable. I also highly recommend the Wayfarer series. If you don't know about it, there are 4 books. I don't know that there are going to be any more, and they're all standalones, so you could actually pick up any book in the series and read it, and you would not be lost in the story or anything like that. So that series is the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers. This book is The Shards of Earth by Adrian Tchaichovsky. So, thank you so much for listening to me. If you like the video, please press like, please subscribe, and I'll be back soon to talk about books, crafts, something else. Thank you.